to the inaugural podcast of The Ask. For our first podcast, together with some incredible guests, I'll be taking a look at how a photograph, now almost 40 years old, continues to have so much significance for an entire nation right up to today. Specifically, we're looking at the 1976 Thammasat University massacre and examining how the Pulitzer Prize winning photograph by Associated Press photographer Neal Ulevich continues to shape the hopes, aspirations, and fears of the Thai people. For this podcast, I've been blessed to be joined by some remarkable guests. So thank you for visiting. I hope you stay and listen. Before we launch into the podcast, I do want to give a short primer on the event to help orient you. In 1973, Thammasat University became the center of the pro-democracy movement sweeping Thailand, demanding greater freedoms for the Thai people and an end to the military dictatorship of Putanam Kitikajan, aka the Field Marshal. The protests at the university soon grew, and in early October, hundreds of thousands of Thais rallied at Democracy Monument in Bangkok. After a violent attempt to suppress the rebellion failed, the Field Marshal and much of the military figures behind the dictatorship fled into exile. Fast forward to 1976, and the political winds had shifted in Thailand. The communist insurgency was gathering strength, part of a wider trend across Southeast Asia at the time. The remaining establishment, including the monarchy, must have seen the Field Marshal as a bulwark against the communist threat. Unthinkably, he was invited to return back to Thailand at the end of that year. Upon news of the dictator's return, in October, thousands of Thammasat University students rallied in protest again, including among them our honored guest speaker, Thongchai Winichakul. On the morning of October 6th, without warning, the police and paramilitary groups attacked the protesters. The assault continued for several hours, and over 100 students are thought to have been killed in the massacre. AP photographer Neal Ulevich was able to reach the university shortly in the aftermath, and it was his harrowing photograph of the lynching of one of those young students that would go on to become a symbol of pain, repression, and protest for generations of Thai. 40 years later, Neal's photograph was repurposed and reenacted in a music video by the underground Thai hip-hop collective RAD, or Rap Against Dictatorship. The video would go on to generate tens of millions of views in the span of a week and spark an outpouring of emotion across Thailand. That's how this story first came to my attention, and I wanted to personally find out how a single photograph could still have so much power over a nation 40 years later. Sorry about that long-winded exposition, but I had to set the stage for this. Please, let's join our guests now. Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to The Ask. I am your host, Weiss Zimi, and today we have an incredible lineup of guests to discuss a really important moment in Thai history that seems to never fade away. It retains its relevancy 40 years on. Specifically, we've gathered here to take a look at the Thammasat University massacre, an iconic photo by AP Pulitzer Prize winning photographer Neal Ulevich that has become linked to that moment in Thai history. And to discuss this topic, we have with us, I'll allow them to briefly introduce themselves for us. So Claire, why don't you just start us off here?
Hi, my name is Clare Veal. I'm a lecturer in the MA Asian Art Histories program at LaSalle College of the Arts, and I undertake research on contemporary Southeast Asian photography and contemporary art.
Thank you. Tara?
My name's Tara Kamoltanabith. I am currently based in Bangkok, Thailand. I'm a multimedia journalist and producer for Disrupt, which is a multimedia platform, op-ed news platform. I report on a wide range of stories, including human interests, crime, politics, and I'm spacing out on whatever current events. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much. And Thongchai?
Hi, my name is Thongchai Winichakul. I retired from University of Wisconsin, Madison a few years ago. I had been teaching in Madison for almost 30 years, since 1991, Southeast Asian history. wrote a book on history of geography, on nationalism, some articles about Thai politics, and main interest is on the transformation to modernity in late 19th century to early 20th century.
Thank you very much. So again, just to sort of frame our discussion for today, well, really this discussion for me came about from the fact that in 2008, a Thai hip-hop group by the title of Rap Against Dictatorship, RAD, released a music video that recreated the scene of an infamous lynching of a student activist during the Thammasat University massacre in 1976. This particular scene was immortalized by a photograph taken by AP photographer Neal Ulevich. And that video sparked obviously outrage from the authorities and an incredible outpouring of support from across Thai society, racking up tens of millions of views within a few weeks of its publication. And for me, the interest that I had specifically in the story was, why does a photograph from 40 years ago still mean so much to Thailand, to the people of Thailand? And that's what really drew me to the story, the power of a photograph. And I can't really think of too many analogies in other parts of the world that I know of. I certainly know that in the United States, like, there are many obviously iconic images of recent American history, but to have one photograph sort of mean so much, I really can't think of a comparative photograph within the context of modern American history. So I found that fascinating, and I want to explore that. And I feel very fortunate to have this group of guest speakers, because I feel that each one of you represents something can bring something very important to this discussion. And having said that, I just want to say that I'm truly honored to have you on this podcast, Thongchai. I understand that in 1976, you were a student at Thammasat University. You were involved in pro-democracy activism at the time. You were part of a student group that were leading protest events and discussions out a move towards democracy in Thailand at that time. And horrifically, you were caught up on the day of the massacre along with the rest of your friends and colleagues. So for you to offer to come onto this program and once again return to a very painful memory, I'm very thankful and appreciative of you offering to join us for this discussion today. So that having been said, Thongchai, I understand that you've just recently come out with a new book, Moments of Silence. It's being published by the University of Hawaii Press, and it's already available on Amazon in a variety of formats, including Kindle, paperback, and hardback. And this book takes you back personally, and also as a rigorous academic to this moment in Thai history and the consequences of it. I have a question for you about your new book, sir.
Yep.
Moments of Silence, about the importance of unforgetting the Thammasat University massacre.
Thank you for asking, and especially asking me to revisit the event of 40 years ago by way of the book, because I would be a bit hard to tell what happened 40 years ago. So talking about a book is better. In fact, I'd like to clarify that the book is not as much about the event, not as much about myself, and not as much about memoir, although all three of them are part of the book. I mean, I talk about the event only in the first two chapters. The rest of them are about memories of the event. I myself involved in the incident, involved in the, part of the student leadership at the time. And later I involved in the memory project at different steps that I describe in the book. Yet the way I want to do it, I don't want to make myself too much in the story. I don't want to make it a memoir, no. That's why I try to set it out right up front and then leave it behind. The rest of the book are about the changing memories, how Thai society deal with the event evasively, never have a full investigation, and at some point, the first 20 years, rarely talk about it in public. Whatever you call the photos, it didn't appear in Thailand until many years later. Thai society never saw it until many years later, and people had not talked about the incident until 20 years after that. Then they start talking, and their video and rap against dictatorship that you mentioned about, in a way, it's a mark of a resurgence of the memory. After the first 20 years silence, and since then, I talk a bit about it, but then somehow, for some reasons, I finished a book by the time, finished a manuscript by the time the rap against dictatorship produced their song. I observed that it's a resurgence, meaning people's attention is unexpected. So what you say that the photo has influence or memorable for the whole 40 years, not quite. The first 20 years, not much. But somehow it revived, partly because the incident never have a full investigation. The state tried to ignore it, even though they can't. And the public find it hard to talk about it. Today, they can talk about it, that there was a violence, there was a massacre, don't do it again, but that's all we can say. We cannot say why it happened. We cannot say who did it. We cannot say who involved in who are the perpetrators. All sorts of those questions are forbidden. Not legally forbidden, but let's say people know that they're not supposed to talk about it. That's what I mean by unforgetting. The difficulty to articulate, to voice out the memory. The memory inside, hard to forget, or maybe impossible to forget, yet people find it hard to articulate in words. People find it hard to produce a narrative about the incident.
Thank you for that clarification, Professor. Yeah, I wasn't aware. That is interesting. I just want to, before I forget here, I do want to thank photographer Neal Ulevich for, in a way, helping this podcast happen. I did reach out to him originally about participating in this discussion, and he was the person who referred me on to you, specifically urging me to interview you about my interest in this topic. That I wasn't fully aware of, the fact that his photograph, Neal Ulevich's photograph, did not in fact circulate in the months and years shortly after the massacre. There was obviously a media blackout. So how shortly after the massacre happened, how did Thai society, how did the people of Thailand first learn about it, given the fact that there was a sort of an attempt to suppress the news about what had happened?
It's a long story, but to make it less complicated, put it this way, there were photos released to the public only one afternoon before the whole thing was shut down. There was a coup at the end of the day after the massacre. coup d'etat. So the military shut down all newspapers, all the mass media, and think about that time in 1970s, there's no social media. So, and in Thailand in particular, all TV, radios, airwaves are under control of the government. Half of the airwave controlled by the military. Even today, half of the airwave is not publicly available. It's controlled all totally by the state, different branches of the state. The media can be controlled by law, by different kind of press law. So shortly after the massacre, I mean, the evening there was a coup and announcement of censorship, swift and strongly enforced, implemented right away. So the photos were released to the public in limited fashion. And during the morning in the massacre, there was no news, no broadcast, because the state, somehow the military, took control of those mass communication in the countries before they staged a coup. So let's say people in Thailand, typically, this is what I learned from my research years later, learn about it, that there was something bad, something wrong, a massacre or mass violence in Bangkok, but it's not clear. It's not clear what happened. And given the fact that it's a unprecedented violence with, I have to say now, people in high, powerful people and people in a high place in Thailand, possibly or probably involved. That's all. People heard about it, people hear about it, and then they don't know exactly what happened, and then they know that they're not supposed to talk about it. Years after that, in fact, only the year after that, people talk about it more because the arrest of my group, 19 people were arrested and stay in jail for almost 2 years, myself included. That is a fact that make people talk about it. So they talk about the case, they talk about incident evasively, but they didn't talk much about it because we don't know where is the line, and if they cross the line, they could be in trouble. So the arrest and the trial becomes internationally issue. Even the US and many other countries try to pressure Thai government to release us. 2 years after the incident, after a year on trial, the government issued amnesty law. So release her from jail. With that amnesty, they issue a swift kind of order or instruction to the whole society to shut up for the sake of reconciliation. So since then, to be precise, since 1978, at the release of our group from prison, since then, September 1978 until about 1995, 96, when we had the first commemoration breakthrough, a public event, almost 20 years, people don't talk about it. During the time, yes, there was a few times that the photos were publicly known. The first time Neal Ulevich photos was shown in Thailand was exactly when he got Pulitzer. Bangkok Post published a photo as a news that this photo from Thailand got the Pulitzer Prize, full stop. It doesn't even have a news or explain what the picture is about. Neal told me, and I went back to check Bangkok Post. Yes, exactly. It's just one picture. Say that this picture got a Pulitzer Prize. Is a picture from Thailand. That's it. It doesn't say what incident. That's an example of how people know it in a way that not quite knowing it. In 1979, there was a news magazine published a few more photos from the incident. That magazine was shut down, was closed, shut down, and right away, and all the magazine was swept out of the market. Those are cases that somehow send a message to people that they're not supposed to talk. Of course, pictures and hearsay, including stories, circulated underground, meaning not publicly. To some extent, I don't really know to what extent, such as on campus, among students, over the younger generations for sure. So that's how the stories continue. That's how the photos continue to circulate among the limited circle. But that's the situation until about 1995. There was a movement to commemorate the massacre. That one is 20th anniversary in 1996. And the process of the movement started about 1995. And that time, the photos and the stories circulate again in a big way. The public becomes aware of the incident. And although they still limit how much we can talk, such as we cannot talk about who the perpetrators were. We cannot talk about why, because it involved people in a high place. In Thailand, we're not supposed to talk about it. And since then, after 1995, 1996, until now, people can talk about in such a limited fashion, but interest remains a bit not high, not low, until recently, the time that involved in the rap Against Dictatorship issue, produced a song. I was surprised too, because the attention and interest in the incident somehow rose in a significant way. I and my friend, since 2016, create an online archive we call doc6, doct6.com. In the first year, we can see that the interest is a bit high, but not much. But let's say shortly after that, until now, many friends told me that somehow younger generations are interested in the massacre very much, significantly, and in a ways that we didn't expect. Until now, I still observe that. I don't want to explain it too quickly why the research and search in the last few years.
You know, I really think that what you shared is fascinating. Like, it is, especially the fact that from, I guess, 80s up to the mid 90s, the only way that massacre was preserved as a national memory of trauma was in the art scene, the underground art scene of colleges, universities around Thailand. To me, that is a really incredible facet to this story. The fact that obviously, you know, it could not be discussed formally in a educational setting, nor could it be discussed anywhere on the public media space. It fell to artists to keep the memory of that trauma and that crime and that violence alive for themselves and for future generations of Thais that might want to find out more about what happened. That's an additional insight that I appreciate you giving us on the topic. And that's actually a really good segue to our guest, Clare. I understand that you've dedicated a significant part of your academic career to studying contemporary art in the Southeast Asian context, with a particular interest in Thai photography, the history of Thai photography. Is that correct? Do I have part of your academic biography?
Yes, correct.
Just to follow up on sort of what Thongchai shared with us about the the massacre and the way it was remembered in the early years after it happened. I guess turning towards your expertise on this subject, you wrote in an article titled "The Charismatic Index: Photographic Representations of Power and Status in the Thai Social Order." This is for a publication called the Trans-Asia Photography Review. Within this article, you wrote that for decades, the Thai elite, specifically the various military juntas that ruled over Thailand, used to use photography to cultivate barami. Am I pronouncing that word correctly, ma'am?
Yes, almost.
What's the proper pronunciation of it, please?
Barami. Very close.
Okay, I can't quite get there, but thank you. So, it's as charismatic power, and this was best evidenced through the aging galleries of the, again, you'll have to correct me with the pronunciation here, the Chaya Jitakorn Photographic Studio. Did I get that name correct?
Chaya Jitakorn, yeah.
Thank you. So I wonder if you could share any insight on what could have been some of the consequences of Neal Ulevich's photo of the massacre lynching on the barami of the military juntas. Could the weakening of military power in the aftermath of the massacre be in some way linked to this photographic immortalization of what this power represented in Thai society?
I don't, as Ajahn Thongchai said, I'm not sure whether this specific photograph could be linked to a kind of weakening of barami after the event. The reason being, of course, because it wasn't really circulated. I think that the kind of focus on maintaining this charisma is perhaps one of the reasons why the event couldn't be spoken about, because it involved, as Ajahn Thongchai said, people in high places. So I think the fact that it can't be enunciated, or that it's treated in a very evasive manner, is linked to it in a way, is linked to a need to maintain a certain level of prestige. But the photograph itself, yeah, I because it wasn't available, I don't think that it had really an effect on the barami of the military governments of the period.
That's fair. That's fair. Thank you. Thank you for that insight, Claire. Just to follow up on again, sort of your area of expertise, going back to a recent interview that was held with you, you were asked that if contemporary art enables us to engage the present, then what about art history? Doesn't it look back into the past instead? In short, does art history not allow us to sort of understand or discuss our present? And you answered that art history is also practice. Even though you're looking back, there are different ways in which the past can become relevant present. I thought that was a powerful statement on your part. And how do you see this as being an example of that?
Well, I think, you know, that as Ajahn Thongchai said, this kind of resurgence of interest in the 6th of October event demonstrates the ways in which kind of unresolved histories continue to haunt or linger on in the present. And I think that the kind of preeminence of Neal Ulevich's image is a sort of symptom of that in many ways. You first start to see the kind of appearance of this image in the work of Thai artists around the same period that the first memorial event was held in 1996. So there was an exhibition held at the same time by a Thai artist called Wasan Sitiget, who completed a painting series called Blue October, where he appropriated Ulevich's photograph along with a number of other images of the event. But what's been interesting for me is the way in which this particular photograph has kind of dominated artistic representations of the event, or attempts to deal with that history. And the reason I think it has is because, not only because it's a very kind of aesthetic image. Of course, it won the Pulitzer because it's aesthetically, it's a very, moving and impactful image. But it's also an image that is quite generalizable in a lot of ways. By which I mean to say, when you look at the way that Thai artists have used it, including, for example, Manit Si Winichakul and Suti Kunawichianon. This image often is shown within the context of other photographs of political conflict in Thailand. So Suti and Manit produced their works in the early 2000s, and within their both bodies of works, Ulevich's photograph was one of several images of political conflicts, including the 1973 protests, as well as the Black May incident of 1992. And what that indicated to me was that at that particular moment in the early 2000s, the kind of specificity of 6th of October couldn't really be enunciated except within the context of this broader history of political dissent. So it had to become kind of generalized as opposed to dealing with those specific questions that Adan Thongchai was referencing before. What you find now with the sort of work that the 6th of October documentary project has been doing is that the other images that were taken of that event, the images that were censored in the Thai press, are actually now being mined for a lot more information that clarifies a lot of the questions, or at least starts to clarify a lot of the questions that continue to surround the incident. So when it comes to the rap against dictatorship appropriation of Ulevich's image, I think what's registered in their kind of pairing of that image with the rap lyrics is actually a sense of frustration that surrounds that image. The fact that it has always been present, that it has always been, well, not always been present, but has been present since the mid-90s, but never really was able to gain traction in terms of answering any of the questions or holding any of the people who are responsible for the massacre accountable for that.
Thank you, Claire, for sharing that with us. No, I think you make a very good point. So in part, one of the reasons why Ulevich's photo became emblematic was the fact that it didn't have that historical specificity that would lock it into a particular sort of place within Thai history. As you said, there was sort of a way that photo could be translated to a general statement about Thai politics and Thai history. If I understood what you shared with me correctly, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here.
No, that's correct. And I think you can also see it in the way that it's been, the kind of chair imagery has also been appropriated to speak to a lot of different political conflicts. So I know that, you know, in the around 2012, 2013, there was a whole series of memes that were circulating that use this kind of imagery. It's used the image of the man with the chair. Similarly, there was a set of line stickers that you could use in that messaging program as well. So in this sense, the power of the image is that it has become kind of divorced from the 6th of October event, but also becomes a kind of symbol for the ongoing kind of unresolution of that event, and also the kind of perpetuation of violence within Thai politics since the 70s.
May I?
Of course, please go ahead.
Think about it this way. This is how I didn't write in the book, but this is how I think about this photo in particular. I think Clare is right that the photo was specifically taken from one incident, yet partly because it doesn't quite fit Thai history, which always glorified leadership, glorified the monarchy, glorified the ancestors, and Thai are peaceful, smiling. This photo doesn't fit. The fact that it's taken from a particular incident, but it doesn't fit, make it kind of, how to say, alive, but at odds with Thai society all the time. I think about the photo Ulevich, even though in absence for the first 20 years, that in fact it had always been there as a ghost. I think the photo represents the whole October 6 incident in the sense that the incident represented by the photo haunt and still haunting, is still haunting Thailand to the present day in such a way that we know that it is there, but we can't talk about it. It's like a ghost who lives with us. I think that's significance of many photos, but especially Ulevich photo, because it represents the whole thing as a ghost, as a spirit that haunts Thailand until today.
I think please go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. So it's this kind of, the photograph has a high degree of specificity, but it also, that specificity cannot be spoken about. So it becomes this very powerful symbol that can be registered in these kind of ongoing conflicts that never seem to be kind of resolved or settled or made kind of clear once and for all.
And just to sort of add some context to what we're talking about here, it's a really photo. It's a wide shot, black and white wide shot of a crowd of onlookers in the background, and in the foreground you have a young man holding up a chair, just about to strike a body hanging from a tree, lynched. It's a really amazing photograph, just that one little moment in time. And I think what, in the context of our discussion in regards to memory and remembering, unforgetting, I look at that crowd, and I think one reason why that photo is so powerful, especially I guess in the context of maybe Thai history, the way it's remembered in Thailand, is that you place yourself, you're drawn to placing yourself in the crowd as an onlooker, and that. And that provides a great segue to the way the event And the photograph of the event came back into the imagination of the public in an entirely new and unexpected way through a music video by a Thai hip-hop group. So this brings discussion to Tara. In a 2018 interview with members of Rap Against the Dictatorship, the hip-hop group that produced this video, for your interview with I believe one artist, Decatorn, am I pronouncing his name correctly?
It was Detaton, I believe.
Detaton. He shared with you that he actually wanted to use the 1992 Black May protest within the music video because it represented the people's unification against authority. But he felt that there were no iconic visuals to go with expressing that within the music video. In your opinion, how is this photo being understood and used by a whole new generation of Thai students, artists, and activists? And why do you believe it still retains such power for Thai youth 40 years after the massacre?
I think I would have to agree with the point that both of the speakers have brilliantly pointed out before, that this point in time and this conflict has truly been unresolved, and it's never really been untangled. It's never been looked into or investigated, or even there's no closure that's ever been had with this situation. And I think it's such an interesting point in time where you can have someone who was like Kun Thongchai, like at the event and there and at the protest, and someone who is a millennial, someone of my generation, who's coming in with a new eye and who didn't specifically live through that moment, but can still see. I think like the questions that after the photo became viral, younger people in my generation who looked at the photo are more inclined to, first of all, learn their history, because as it's not taught in school, a lot of people don't really know the details or the specifics or the what and what about this event. So it got people more active, first of all, in researching and being more informed about what's going on. And I think the music video kind of coincided with this rise of young people being more interested in politics. Like it was when, if I'm remembering correctly, it was also when like the rise of the Future Forward was coming. It was when after we've been, a lot of people have been demanding for an election for a while. So a lot of things kind of coincided, and it started, I think it spearheaded this other, maybe not spearheaded, but it was definitely part of a movement of a younger generation of Thais becoming more vocal about their frustrations about the government, about authority, and being more analytical and maybe more critical of the power that be. And I think that's a full circle, because when the Thammasat thing happened, that was a huge effort on students and university students across Kingdom. And this again is now an uprising, a much slower and like not as violent, but still somewhat of an uprising, especially now that you see like online. I don't know if you guys have been on Twitter recently, but arguably it's gotten very, very, very aggressive and very, very violent with some of the conversations that people have been having. Like, for example, every time there's a parliament meeting, there's always like a trending hashtag like Lathaban Heng Soy or Lathaban Sontin, and more so, people are more critical of specific things that's being said in government. They're being more analytical about the measures that are being put forward. They're being more, conscious about what they're being fed, whether or not it's the correct information. They're also questioning things like the institution, we're probably not going to touch on, but also they're questioning the need for a higher power beyond government and stuff like that. That's never really been resolved before. And I think what Kun Thongchai and Clare said about this moment in time being unresolved is being kind of being carried on by this generation. We're kind of carrying on this burden. We're kind of looking back at what happened then and asking how much has truly changed since then. What has gotten better? What has not gotten better? And what do we, as the public, have to do now in order, like, what do we want to see in society? And yeah, like what knots from that moment do we still have to untangle?
Thank you for you as a journalist, Tara. You've done a remarkable job over the course of your reportage, talking about this sort of new wave of pro-democracy sentiment within a generation of both Thai youth and Thai artists, and you've done extensive work reporting on hip hop groups like Rap Against the Dictatorship, and I think that you just recently published a recent article for Disrupt that takes a look at that anti-authoritarian, pro-democracy sort of vein of discourse within Thai music, the Thai music scene that's really sort of taken root in the last couple of years. So you as a reporter, you've spent some time looking at this. What role do you think music has? What are some of the things that are happening now that were not available to Thongchai and his colleagues in 1976 when they were emerging as pro-democracy voices within the Thammasat University campus? What tools are available now that you feel will make a lasting difference as far as charting a new course for Thailand, at least as far as tools that artists and students are using now to express themselves?
I think as I'm listening back to Kun Thongchai and Claire's story, so one of the things I understand but haven't really like thought about in a very active way was the fact that people truly didn't have access to photos back then. So like my parents were also Thammasat students, so they were also present during the actual massacre. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, so growing up, I've always had this idea, like they've always told me about it in first person. So I never kind of thought about it in context of a person in that time, not being a university student and not knowing what's happening. And I know like from now, there's still so many debates on the logistics, how many people died, who was involved. Like there's so many arguments around it. And I think what immediately stood out to me was that a photo would not be able to be buried at this point in time. I think time and time again, we've seen, whether it's the case of the Saudi girl using Twitter to ask for refuge in another country, or whether it's a video that just happened 2 weeks ago of a school director allegedly appearing to be groping a student. Things that people have gotten away with in the past are now coming to the spotlight, or now being shown as a spotlight in your face and with social media, and like I believe after that video trended, because there were some things about it being an underage child, a lot of Facebook pages started pulling the video, but it was already too late because it was already up in public. So people had already, copied the video, people had already ripped the video off, and people had already had access to the video, and it spurred like a whole mountain of conversation, debate, and just it was just inevitable for the photo to be viewed over and over again. And I think right off the bat, that was my first thought, that hopefully media coverage and things will be less monopolized and would be more open to the general public now with social media. But I also don't know if that's, always, and there's both sides of the coin. I don't always necessarily know if that's always a great thing. And Yeah, and I think the ability to, you know, I think people are more willing to talk about more and like kind of controversial things online is because they have the ability to be anonymous. Like when you're filling out a Twitter bio, you just have 40 characters. You don't even link anything of personal information to it. So you're, apart from your IP address, you're shielded by your anonymity or your online persona. So I think people in the past, when you had to be shush about who you talk about what with, now, like, you know, and even among friends, you have no idea if people are going to have the same exact stance with you about something. So not even just controversial, but something that's potentially illegal. You could be talking about this and someone could call Les Majest law on you and or something like along that realm. But now you could tweet something out in the public and just pose a question, like someone recently did months ago, like, why do we need a king? And have that be the topic of discussion. Not necessarily have an answer, not necessarily have a correct perspective, but being able to have an input about something that, you know, it's I think where there's a move towards kind of freedom of speech, or at least freedom of discussion online, that we may have not seen in the past, and people being a little more vocal and critical about things they're afraid of because of legal consequences.
Certainly, and I think that there's something remarkable. I mean, it was just bringing myself back, 20 years ago. It was unthinkable for myself to have an opinion as a private citizen, and having the ability to describe that opinion in a public space that could be easily accessed by millions of people around the world. That just simply didn't exist. So I think that, you know, you make a really good point on how the World Wide Web, the internet, has created a unprecedented forum for expression and discussion, and it's had both ills, and it's also had many benefits too, of course, such as the ones that you just sort of shared with us about how people in Thailand have now used it as a tool for expression that wouldn't have existed otherwise. And I certainly think that, you know, going back to your reportage on the music scene, you know, going back to the 80s or 90s in Thailand, if you were a band and you had a contrarian anti-state view to express, I think Thongchai would confirm this, there would be no way you would get on TV, there would be no way you'd get on radio. But because, of course, of the tools that are now available to artists like Rap Against the Dictatorship, such as the YouTube platform, you can publish your work and find an audience for it. So it is an exciting moment in Thai history, and thank you for doing your part to report on it.
Absolutely, thank you. It's been a pleasure and a thrill to watch unfold, and scary at times.
Clare, Thongchai, do you have any follow-ups to this part of the discussion before we move on?
No, I don't have anything to add. Just thank you for having me on the program to have a chance to talk about the incident. Well,
I certainly think that I could spend hours talking to you about your experiences and your understanding of the incident in Thai history, sir. Just as we get towards the end of the program here, there was recently a report that I read about another student protest against the banning of the major opposition party in Thailand. Yeah. This report goes back to March 2nd, just of this year. Again, at Thammasat University. And to sort of connect the past to the present, I think that I want to thank you, your colleagues Thongchai, and of course your parents too, Tara, and everyone who took part in that sort of early expression of a desire for greater freedoms in Thailand. And I think that while of course the massacre will always remain a painful event in Thai history, and a needless event too, I would add, I think that the fact that students like yourself stepped forward 40 years ago has empowered subsequent generations of both Thai students and Thai private citizens to advocate for positive change in Thailand over the decades. And I think that that's a really, for me, it's an inspiring thing to see the fact that despite the tragedy that occurred at that university, it didn't crush that spirit, and that spirit very much continues to live on in Thailand. I do have one question for you, Thongchai, before we sort of really sort of wrap things up here. If I understand from your biography, you, after the massacre, as you said, you were imprisoned for 2 years along with several other members of the student leadership that were organizing the protests on the university campus in October of 1976. But once you were released from prison, you returned back to the university to complete your studies?
Yes.
Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me how it felt when you, after, of course, you know, I simply cannot in my mind imagine going through an experience like that,
Well,
and then returning back to the place where that happened, and not only returning back to that place, but completing my studies, and as I think that from what I understand from your biography, when you eventually did graduate from Thammasat University, you graduated with the first honors. What was that feeling like for yourself?
well, I think being young is one factor. It didn't mean that I didn't feel anything, but let's say in some ways, at the time, I feel something strongly that fading a bit when I'm getting older. But in some ways, I feel something stronger when I get older. Like one chapter is about the search for the missing body of my friend. I mean, personal friend. I have a friend who died in that incident, and his body disappeared. I searched. It took me many years to search for the answer where the body is gone. And it involved, the main thing involved his parents, especially his father. I guess I look back at my experience in searching for the answer for his father. I look back, I searched the answer about early 2000. By that time, I'm already a father. So I share the feeling of his father. So this is just example of something I feel stronger over time, something I feel not as strong. I mean, it's different. So back to the question, I think being young is helpful in dealing with a trauma in some ways. And of course, different people deal with it differently. Some of them cannot go back to study. Yeah, it's true. Somebody even close to me, I mean, person I know pretty well, my another friend, he refused to go back. And in the end, register and study, get a degree on an open university, never go back to any campus. So I think people just deal with it differently. For me, I was able to go back and study and finish. But it doesn't mean that even after that, I work at Thammasat. I taught at Thammasat for 3 years. I mean, going there every day, or even now, I go there. I can still go back to Thammasat. It doesn't mean that I didn't feel anything, but of course, the feeling is people deal with it differently.
Well, I certainly think it was inspiring that you were able to confront that pain and return back to that place. So that is sort of where I was coming from with my question, sir. I think that we're right at the top of the podcast, and unfortunately, we will have to wrap things up here. I'd love to spend several more hours with everyone on this call, but I understand that it's quite late in Singapore and in Thailand, so I will have to wrap things up here. But this remarkable group of guests who just joined me today, each and every one of them are doing really fascinating things in their respective careers, and I'd like to give everyone a chance to sort of direct the listeners to this podcast to stuff that you might be working on or doing that could be a follow-up interest to the listeners on this podcast. So why don't we start with Tara? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're up to presently?
Sure. Currently, I am working as a multimedia journalist and producer at a new media platform called Disrupt, THISRUPT.co. And yeah, we try to cover provocative stories that get people thinking critically, analytically, and we mostly focus on content that our motto is check the power. So we believe that the media responsibility should be checking the power that be and making sure the authority are, doing their job and just making sure, just holding them accountable for their actions. And yeah, I host a bi-weekly series that there's one series once a week that I do on Thai history. So the history of like serious stuff like Bangkok, the history of Labor Day, stuff like that, as well as more fun stuff like the history of the lottery, the history of the taxis, the history of durian. And we also have the series called Check the Power, where we take a second look at what's happening in the news and kind of talk about it, like highlight in on it, maybe invite experts to talk about it, give a context on it. And yeah, can check us out online on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and my personal handle is Terabyte, TEIRRABYTE, across all platforms. So you can find me like that too.
Thank you. And Claire, I understand that you are currently teaching at LaSalle, Singapore, correct?
Yes, that's right. So I currently teach in the MA Asian Art Histories program at LaSalle in Singapore. So we are the only MA program in the world that focuses on modern and contemporary Southeast Asian art. And we're open for students. So if you're interested in learning more about the program or LaSalle, we have a dedicated microsite. It's asianarthistories.com, or you can look us up on lasalle.edu.sg.
Thank you so much. And Thongchai, we'd like to talk a little bit about the book that we discussed several times throughout this podcast that you just recently.
Sorry, the voice.
Hello, Thongchai, could you hear me?
Yeah. A moment ago, the voice disappeared. Okay.
Yes, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I was asking if you want to share with us any last details about the book that you just recently published that we discussed several times throughout this podcast. If you want to direct people on where they can find a copy for themselves.
Nothing to add. I mean, I took too much time talking about it already. You can find it on Amazon or Hawaii University Press. And hope hope you and your listeners take time reading the book.
Well, I will share that I have a copy for myself, and I just simply cannot put it down. I find it incredibly well written. I find it an easy read, and I find it a compelling read. So if you're interested in Southeast Asian history, Thai history, issues around crime and justice and memory, I would urge the listeners of this podcast to seek out Moments of Silence on Amazon and on the additional sites that it's available for, and to get a copy for yourself. And with that, I just want to close off this podcast by thanking each and every one of you for your time. And I think that certainly my takeaway from this is that art has consequences, and art can take on an entirely unexpected force in society. And I think that this discussion really sort of is testimony to that. And I want to wish each and every one of you well as you move forward through the rest of this very interesting year that we're all part of, regardless of where we are in the world. And of course, my final thoughts are with the students of 1967, including your colleagues, Thongchai, yourself, and Tia's parents. And I hope that at some point Thailand comes to peace and to some measure of justice for what happened on that day. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me, and please do keep in touch.